Fridays bring on this guy who has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. How about it for Michael Shure, everyone? Hello, sir.
Hey,
Thank you for your thank you for your patience and your
a
waiting.
lot of Florida. It was a big week in Florida this week, huh?
It was. There was some strong entries in Florida, and one of the entries you helped provide us. I mean, I think it's. We usually have a pretty good dragnet over everything, but you never know, and that I think was a late ad. So
All right, good. I'm
appreciate
glad.
that.
I'm glad.
Well, Michael, I'll start with the politics of Washington and the fact that as we speak, we've seen Speaker Johnson now move forward this Ukraine funding package. Looks like
Yeah,
they'll. I was mentioning earlier in the show, he has slow walked this thing and actually prevented a vote. And he seemed as though in the meeting with Trump, who doesn't want this package to go through, seemed to continue to slow walk it and actually be an obstacle to its passage. Something has happened, and he's okay with it now. I was speculating that he's, part of the Gang of Eight. Maybe he got some intel that was, regarding the war and Russia, et cetera, that changed his mind. Or is it pure politics? Or did he feel that the stink of not being able to get this through would get out on the GOP? What do you think was motivating this? And is that a fair state of the state, the way I've just put it?
I mean, I guess so. Like it's hard to say. I think what motivated it was the other things, right? I mean, I think that getting Ukraine aid through probably wasn't the thing that, the Speaker Johnson wanted to do more than anything in the world, but he knew that getting Israel funding in and getting some of the other things that came along with this bill across the line was an important part of what his agenda is. The other thing is he's the speaker now. So now he's speakering. He's not just freedom caucusing, and he's not just conservative guying, and he's not just trumping. I mean, it doesn't mean that he's not going to go right back to that and that he isn't that at heart, but he realized that he has to build a coalition in order to get anything done. He has a majority of just about one right now once Gallagher leaves. And already there are other people leaving the caucus. Not Mike LaTurner said he was leaving, a congressman from Kansas, so it's not a risky seat. But just to see this kind of stuff happening, he sees the walls crumbling, and he's like, "Well, we got to do something. We have to get something done." And I think that was part of what informed this a little bit, a little statesmanship. If you look at it in its best form. The other side of it is that there are a lot of people in the Republican caucus, a lot of senators on the Republican side, and Mitch McConnell speaking to him. That's somebody else who he speaks to regularly now that he wouldn't have spoken to regularly 6 months ago. And Mitch McConnell has made Ukraine a priority. And because of that, I think that he's listening to all the voices in the room.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Here's Agol saying Republicans refused to fund FEMA aid to Maui after the fires and instead spent their effort on the conspiracy theories about space lasers and blue roofs, as well as 1,800 abducted imaginary children. And then he points out that they refused to fund the rebuild of the Baltimore Bridge, instead spin conspiracy theories about how Obama's team of elite hackers seized control of the ship to crash it purposefully. I see a pattern here. So was there a question? To Agolf's point, was there a quality? I think this is kind of what you're hinting at of statesmanship here to kind of get off of the extreme and to get more sort of on the center rudder of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. And because of that, disassociating yourself from that, even if he was party to it for many years, I shouldn't say all of it, and I shouldn't say that he was as far off of the deep right end as a lot of his colleagues are now, or certainly a loud minority of his colleagues are. But he is, he's somebody who sees the priorities of his caucus, and he also sees his own priorities and the priorities of the Senate and how to get things passed. So he can criticize Biden, but knows that this is going to be legislation that passes the Senate and gets, signed by the president. That's important to Johnson. And it's an election year, right? I mean, he's trying to, as speaker, you're trying to keep a majority, or you're trying to keep as many people as you can happy. And he feels like he's never going to keep the extreme right happy. He's never going to get those very, very far right sort of scene stealer type members of Congress. They're never going to be happy. So let's say to them, be damned, and let's go forward with what our priorities are in a very conservative way, but also understanding that we're going to have to get a coalition.
So now to the political side of that, will that cost him his speakership?
I don't think so. He did a curious thing, right? I mean, the leadership team on the Republican side wanted to change the rule, that what they call the MTV, the motion to vacate, which allows one member of Congress to put forward a motion to vacate the speaker's chair. And Johnson said, no, let's just keep that in. I don't even want to get in the sandbox and fight with these guys. I just want to keep doing the business, the people's business, as he would put it. And in many ways, it sort of ticked off the moderate, I should say, moderate leadership of the Republican House. I don't know that that's a real oxymoron, but the leadership, the people who are the standard bearers for the Republicans in Congress, and it ticked them off because they want to see the speaker's chair secure. They don't want to see these fights. They want to see the Republicans in a political year together. And Johnson, by saying, no, I don't want to bother with changing a rule because that's just going to cause much more conflict. Just let's forge ahead. That upset them, but it's a risk. I think that Johnson's going to be able to say, we got these things done. And I don't think anything that the speaker's doing right now is going to endanger him any more than he was endangered before.
I want to ask you about something else political before I move on to another issue, and that is Kamala Harris. There is, and it's so interesting to see it, so much written right now about Kamala Harris, and a bunch of it is she's as popular as Beyonce, and a bunch of it is nobody wants to vote for her on the ticket, and you'll not get independents as long as Kamala Harris is on the ticket. These things are coexisting in the many pieces I've read on this.
I mean, I don't believe either in a big way, right? I mean, typically I've always been a believer in the notion that not a single person votes for the vice president outside of their family, right? I just don't think that anybody goes to the polls and votes for the vice president. I think 2024 will be different for many voters because of the president's age. But I think that the people that are prevented from doing that, I still think they're deciding between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I don't know that the vice president is going to play a big role in terms of making a difference in this race. I don't think she's as popular as Beyonce. I don't think she needs to be. I don't think she's, as unpopular as the people who say they'll stay home to not vote for her, because there'll be a handful of those. I just think that she's the vice president, and she's not going to leave the ticket, and they're not going to kick her off the ticket without any cause for it, because that would be politically fatal for the president.
One of the things that I see is this is in the criticism of her, and a lot of the stuff is kind of man on the street stuff, the sort of thing that you're very familiar with, because while it may give you a slice of the electorate or of opinion, it's somewhat artificial, and yet you try to get a representative slice, et cetera. But I've seen, everything she's been put in charge of, she hasn't made an impact with. And from the very start of this administration, I thought, oh my God, they've given her impossible stuff to make an impact. Like they've given her the border. They gave her something else that was, I thought to myself, this is, they literally just dumped on her desk these things that she would be the figurehead for all these things you could literally make no progress on. I mean, that would be noticeable. So I always feel like that criticism of her is not fair. Plus, the VP can only do so much, and that's kind of what you're saying generally.
Yeah, and every vice president gets their little assigned role, and then they fade off into their little nook of the world, and they sit around and do very little, right? I mean, they're advocates for the administration. They break ties in the Senate, which she's had to do more than several other vice presidents. But I mean, what's a big piece of action that was impactful in election that a vice president has ever accomplished? Al Gore was signed with shrinking government and sort of taking a lot of the red tape out of government and a lot of the bureaucracy. He did that. They say it went, but nobody went in 1996 and voted for Bill Clinton or for Bob Dole in that election because of over that fact over, oh, well, Al Gore did this and he did a good job at it or he did a bad job at it. I mean, nobody pays attention to it. And yeah, she was given thankless tasks. That's what vice presidents get. Immigration is a big issue this year. People can point and say, well, that immigration is a mess. On the other side, they'll say that, and they can say it's because of Kamala Harris. It still doesn't matter. The people that don't want to vote for Donald Trump are not going to vote for him, and they're not going to vote for him because Kamala Harris is the vice president in numbers that are going to be significant enough to matter.
You know the Trump crowd better than most because they send you out to these various places. And you've talked about it before, it's an elucidative experience on one level, and it's also a frustrating experience. And but it's certainly a unique experience compared to those experiences that the rest of us have. I mean, you're with these people a lot, and I'm wondering to what extent. So those are the extremists, the ones that go to the rallies, et cetera. But I wonder if you could, with that knowledge, marry it with your knowledge of just the electorate in general, and tell me how these Trump trials and his pronouncements, how that moves the political meter for the general election.
Again, it's stuff that's hard to predict right now. It's not going to be moved among the people that go to rallies, that get into cars, that are basically Grateful Dead fans for Donald Trump, that just go wherever he's playing. Right? That's not going. They're not going to be affected. They're emboldened by the trials. They wear his mugshot on sweatshirts and T-shirts. They say it's a political witch hunt. They echo the things that Donald Trump says in those little moments after court. So they're not the ones that you're going to see that are affected by it. And when I get someone at those rallies who said, well, yeah, I guess it would make me think a little more if you were convicted or if you were in jail, that's a little bit down the road. The real question is what does it do to Donald Trump, the candidate, and how he is able to actually campaign and interact with voters that he has to win over, not the ones he's already won over. The other part of it is that the people don't tend to make their minds up on those things until they're done. So if there is a guilty verdict, the jury is out for a very little bit of time and not much time at all, then you're talking about a different situation, a different climate there. And I think that when that happens, that will change the tide just a little bit. But to predict it now. We don't know. We've never had it before. There's never been a president or a former president on trial. There's never been a candidate who's on trial while they're running for president and they have the nomination. So it's to predict it. What do I think? I don't think it's going to affect his core voters. I think it's going to affect some independent voters. And I think people that were close to maybe leaving Biden and voting for Trump may have second thoughts if he's convicted.
I was thinking about the fealty to Trump that so many people have, the enthusiasm that he has from so many of his supporters. And I was thinking about who else at the presidential level, and maybe even, the legislative level, maybe a congressional member of Congress or senator, et cetera, had that kind of enthusiasm associated with him. And so I think maybe JFK had some of that.
Yeah, of course, we weren't around to know that. I think that that would be the first person I would think of. Post presidencies seem to have them. I think Reagan, after his White House years, had that in a way, that he was lionized and he was looked at as, the Morning in America stuff was amplified even more. But as president and as candidate, I not certainly in our lifetime has there ever been. I mean, there've been people who have emboldened the partisans, right? I mean, I think that Bill Clinton had some of that. Barack Obama, certainly the first time he ran, had some of that. But it wasn't impermeable, right? I mean, it wasn't like if Barack Obama had been arrested, a lot of people would have fallen off the train. There's something that we haven't seen that is cult-like, that is not this sort of tribal adherence to somebody. I've never seen that. I don't think there's a precedent for it in American history.
And finally, the Middle East, the back and forth between Iran and Israel added to the issues in Gaza.
Yeah.
Give me again, I mean, you're our political analyst. So, apart from, I mean, I've seen more retired generals on television than I care to even, I could never keep up with the count. But now I turn to you for the politics of it all. I don't mean to be at all dismissing the insanely sensitive nature of everything going on there.
No.
But tell me how it impacts policies and politics in this country.
Well, I think the politics of this, of what just happened, right, and with the retaliatory bombing in Iran by Israel, I think is I think that's good for Joe Biden. I think what it showed was that Joe Biden going to Benjamin Netanyahu and said, "We will not tolerate nor will we support any kind of mass retaliation, any kind of attack on nuclear sites in Iran. None of that. You're not going to get our support." And so Israel said, we're going to respond, but it seemed to be, war is war, but it seemed to be a restrained response. It was like, don't do that to us again, and we're doing this to you now, and just stop. And I think to that end, I think Biden had an impact there, and I think that the presidency itself had an impact, and that always benefits the president when that happens. It's a tough spot for the president still with what's going on, supporting Israel, seeing arms deals go through, seeing this money come through Congress. He's helped by the fact that it's a Republican House that is pushing it through, that it is informed by Christians as well as Jews, and that it's not just these Democrats who are supporting it, because Democrats, by and large, especially progressive, liberal, younger Democrats, are irate over what Israel has done in Gaza. The disproportionate response to October 7th is how many of them see it. And the president has continued and showed and said words like ironclad over and over about America's support. That's going to have it's going to take a political toll somewhere. He is going to get Muslim Americans and Arab Americans under his umbrella as he campaigns, and those voices will be heard. Whether they'll make a difference, we don't know.
And so that latter groups, or those latter groups to which you referred, they might shy away, you're saying, from at least enthusiastically voting for Biden, although Trump would appear to be even more radical on the issues that they care about.
Trump is the Muslim ban guy. Trump is the person who has kowtowed to Israel and has put Israel first and foremost on his agenda. So to people who are angry at Israel, Donald Trump is not the antidote to that anger. They're going to say that neither is Joe Biden, so we can sit home, or maybe it benefits a third-party candidate just because people do like to vote who are interested in these issues. That said, I don't see where it's going to make a huge difference outside of the state of Michigan. And I do think that the Biden political team and the Democrats are smart enough to know that they're going to get a lot of Muslim Democrats to say what we just said, Mark. I mean, Donald Trump is not our friend. He is not going to help us in this. Joe Biden has listened to us. Joe Biden has made inroads to Benjamin Netanyahu. He said what we will not tolerate. He's asked for them to do humanitarian aid. He's put pressure on them, and he has brought up the fact that, yes, indeed, there will be consequences if those things don't happen. So I think that's going to matter later on.
In our last minute, comment on RFK Jr., who's probably the leading third-party candidate. He, two things. One, says unapologetically this week that emissaries on the part of Donald Trump asked him if he'd be interested in being Trump's running mate, members of Trump's team, effectively. Meantime, I think this just happened yesterday, Kennedy family members endorsed President Biden in a real show of support. I mean, they were, the photo op shows them all there surrounding Biden and essentially rejecting their relative, RFK Jr. Could you speak to this situation, which we'll have to kind of keep an eye on in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, I mean, the president's campaign is going to have to make sure that everyone knows that and what they believe, which is that RFK Jr. Can only help Donald Trump, that voting for him does not help the country. That's what they're going to say. And not only that, the fact that the Trump, team has made outreach to RFK Jr., if in fact that's true, only helps Biden, because it just pushes Kennedy more toward Trump. And independent voters have a chance to vote for Trump if they don't like Biden, and they're choosing not to. So if they vote for Kennedy, that means that they're voting for somebody that Donald Trump likes, and they're voting for somebody whose campaign has had problems with people who work for it, who are supporting Donald Trump, who say that the main goal of this is to beat Joe Biden, or to see Joe Biden defeated. I don't think that the taste of RFK Jr. is going to last very long in Democrats' minds. I do think that there are going to be problems for Democrats in some of the southern states, where the Kennedy name, RFK Sr., very, very revered. And I think that's where they're going to have to do their work. Places like Georgia and North Carolina.
Just to put a fine point on it, Kerry Kennedy, now she's his sister, the daughter of RFK.
Yeah.
She said this: a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for our democracy and our decency. It is a vote for what my father called for in his own presidential announcement in 1968. Right. Our right to the moral leadership of this planet. I mean, she makes no bones about it.
They're going to have to go into the South. They're going to have to go into Black communities. They're going to have to say that voting for RFK Jr. is not voting for RFK Sr. And the Biden campaign knows that. And that's where their biggest vulnerabilities are, as far as RFK, in my opinion, as far as RFK Jr. Is concerned. That's where the biggest vulnerabilities lie. I don't, again, think that he is going. I think if he takes anything from either candidate, he will take more from Trump, because people at rallies that I speak to, when I ask them who would be appealing to them on who isn't Donald Trump, all of them say RFK Jr. They say it before they say DeSantis. They say it before they say any other Republican. It's always RFK Jr. So the tendency there is to think that, he's on their side, and whether it's because of vaccines or whether it's because he is a thorn in the side of Democrats and they love owning the libs, it doesn't matter. He's looked at tastefully on the other side, and they have to keep driving that wedge.
Michael, love that you visit with us. I have to go back to D.C. for my parents next week, so I won't be here, and I'm counting on you to be kind to Kim in my absence. And also, I think someone will be filling in for me to kind of co-host with Kim. I need you to really bring it next week. I feel like you do every week, but I just want to kind of ask you to really lean in next week.
I like working with Kim more than I like working with you, so it's going to be just fine.
What?
Wow.
You started the conversation. I just
yeah, this is true. You certainly did finish it. There's no question about it.
But you know what starts tomorrow? The Stanley Cup play. The Stanley
I was going
Cup
to say something with hockey.
The Stanley Cup playoffs start tomorrow. I implore all of you, everyone who is part of the Mark Thompson Show, to give it a watch. It's the best.
Maud says, "Thank you, Michael. We adore you." The crowd loves their Michael Shure. How about that?
Caitlin Clark does is I don't.
Yeah, there you go. And that's a Taylor Swift move too, and her new album just dropped. I'm sure you want to get back to listening to it. All right, Michael. Thank you, Michael Shure, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.